I can send you mine.
Oh, okay, no. Thank you everyone for joining us at the 53rd annual meeting of the National Conference of Black Political Scientists. I am Valeria Sinclair Chapman. I am your chair and discussant. We have several presenters today. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves briefly and to share with us about what they are presenting. And I'm going to ask that we leave some time. We are shortened, right? We're used to 90 minutes or more in terms of presentations and presentation time, and we don't have quite as much under this format, this virtual format. So I'm going to ask that you keep that in mind as you make your comments, and I will try to give you each about 10 minutes, even though you might have been more prepared for about 15, but that would take the entire time. If we want to leave time for any discussion, then we should aim for somewhere between 7 and 10 minutes. I'm not going to take much time because I know we want to jump right in, and I am going to actually save my comments. So those of you from whom I have not yet received your papers, please send them along, and I will try to give you some feedback after the incopes, after we've kind of wrapped up. And I think without further ado, I will move to get started. I'm going to proceed in the order in which you are listed, unless you all have come up with another, a different kind of approach. And I'm gonna allow you all, I'm gonna ask, does everyone have the ability to share screens, the support person, or do I need to make that availability?
Everyone should have it, so we are good to go.
Awesome.
Go on. I'm sorry. I don't. This is Jayme. I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay. Let me know if I need to do something to ensure that people are able to share screen. I will at least check.
No worries. I will, if you guys message me in the chat, then I'll make sure that you're promoted to co-host to be able to get those sharing permissions.
All right, perfect. I cannot see all the way through everyone here. So is Keisha here? Okay. All right. Dr. Caruth. Right. I hope that they're able to find us. Maybe oops. I don't know what I just did. This is scary. I'm not sure what just happened. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. So that might have been someone, I'm not sure what just happened. I'm going to ask then Dr. Samuels, I'm gonna ask that you actually get started. You got elevated to the top of the line.
Oh God.
I've been quite prepared. And that perhaps when and if Keisha or Dr. Caruth, when they are able to join us, perhaps we will try to get them into rotation. So I'll give you just a few minutes, Dr. Samuels, to get your slides ready and to share them.
I'll see if I'll let me stop. Okay, I think I just emailed my presentation to Matt. Did you get it?
Who did you email it to?
Is it Amanda? Is it Amanda?
Amanda Tunde. Why don't you? Okay.
Did you get it?
Let me send you my email, Dr. Samuels.
Okay.
I can maybe share it if that would help.
Okay.
I'm sorry if we had some technical difficulties. Amanda, maybe we need to, is it Amanda that's doing this? Maybe we need to share your email in the chat so that people can send you their slides in case there's some technical difficulties. That's a lot to manage, but I would appreciate it.
Happy to do it. Keisha also just joined. She may still be getting audio up, but
Okay.
I'm here. I'm late. I'm sorry. I was enjoying the previous panel and got lost. And Naj kept on popping in to come get me. And I was like, is Naj got like weak internet today? Why am I accessing him? Why am I seeing him come and go? But yes, I'm here.
All right. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Keisha. Do you, Dr. Samuels, Albert is preparing. Did you want to go on and are you prepared now to present your paper or do you need some more time?
Me or Albert?
Well,
You, Keisha.
I'm ready. I'm ready to go. If Albert,
Go.
you need a few more minutes.
Go.
Oh,
Go.
okay. All right. All right. Keisha, you have been moved behind.
Moved and seconded.
All right, very good. So we'll reconvene after this. And Dr. Samuels, we're gonna plan for about 10 minutes or less, given if we wanna make sure that we have some discussion. There are several panelists too. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I am literally just ran into the room and I'm happy to be here. So this work is co-authored with a colleague, Roger Carruth. He's in the School of Communications at Howard University, and it looks at the unvaccinated. So the role of social media, disinformation in the Black community in DC in particular. So this interdisciplinary research funded by the Knight Foundation, what we've done is we collected 530 surveys last summer. We did 6 focus groups via Zoom this fall, and we're going to collect more surveys this summer to have 2 points in time as the COVID-19 pandemic has changed and evolved over time. But at this moment in time, we're looking at what is the digital environment. So we talk about social media, but we got to really think about what does that mean? What does that mean for Black people? What is disinformation and misinformation, and how do they differ? We care about the history of misinformation and Black people in the United States. This is not new stuff. We're just seeing it now on social media, which is the new part. And then what is the connection between Black communities, misinformation, and COVID-19, and particularly to the vaccinations? So what is the digital environment? So yes, we know it's the use of devices and we consume digital information, but it's this multimedia consumption of information in bite-sized pieces, and it's consumed almost all day. We get alerts, we get pings, it's something is happening on one of our electronic devices almost all day. And then the platforms is we have this integrated communication across apps. And that means that you can have very different audiences and the types of information shared. Like for instance, my Twitter feed at one point was literally all cats and Ukraine. And I wasn't like, I feel like Black Twitter fell out, and I was like, where did Black Twitter go? And it was because of my likes and the previous algorithms and all that. But it really did show me and indicate like this idea of different types of information depending on what your immediate past behavior is. But this also then relates to the convergence of like-minded people talking to each other. And this is the horizontal flow of citizen to citizen versus the old school traditional vertical flow of media companies telling us what is going on. And these social virtual relationships become engaging, but what's really important is they start shaping our social experiences. So they can influence our actions, they can influence our thoughts, they can lead to more social activism. You develop online relationships and you may never have even met this person. And so this idea of going back and forth between the real world and the non-real world actually has implications for how we matter, how we interact with each other. We know it affects politics, and that it transcends our daily life because you actually probably spend more time on your social media apps than you do talking face to face with people now, particularly with the pandemic. But oh, come on, there we go. So misinformation, this is misleading and incorrect information. So it's lies and false information. Disinformation is purposely misleading. It is shared to deliberately deceive. It is information used to weaponize and deceive and manipulate people. And it literally is designed to get a negative response by misleading people. Think about the 2016 election and changing 10% of Black voters in certain communities, less than 10% of voters in certain communities, and all of a sudden Clinton doesn't win Michigan. Those all ideas of false and misleading information that is then weaponized. So when we think about misinformation in Black communities, we know it's not new. If you just think about public health and medical racism, so Black women being used for medical experiments during slavery and the creation of the whole field of gynecology, this is not necessarily misinformation being told to them, but it's this idea of not sharing the idea of using Black women who were enslaved as real world guinea pigs, and then the Nazis using that in their propaganda. The Tuskegee syphilis experiment is the most well-known one. And then Henrietta Lacks more recently with Johns Hopkins Hospital that used her cells without her consent, and the idea that no one ever informed her family, so that people were holding this information but not informing Black people about what was being used with their cells. We also then, COVID-19 and conspiracy theories, these are general, but also tied to the Black community, it was believed that COVID-19 poses a threat to Black people. But then on the other hand, Black people thought that it was being used as a population control, or as like a weapon for population control. There was tweets about Bill Gates trying to depopulate the planet, and this was on across social media platforms. The vaccine is going to cause Black genocide. COVID-19 is man-made and is a biological weapon against Black people. COVID is the new eugenics movement. None of these claims are true. They're not based in facts. But what happened, and what my colleagues and I have been tracking, is that many cases of this disinformation related to COVID-19 and conspiracy theories is it starts small and then is amplified. Maybe you think if it's a joke, you hit like, you forward it, you retweet it, you post it on Facebook, but then someone else picks it up and it goes further and further. And so to make these connections between sort of misinformation and the pandemic and vaccines, again, we did surveys. 60.2% of all respondents were Black. Average time to complete the survey was 12 minutes. We did it through a Qualtrics QR code. Everybody that completed a survey got a $20 Bank of America debit card. And the questions, there were 63 total questions that were grouped into 6 categories. And so we asked political questions, but also their social media engagement and their idea about the COVID-19 vaccine. And so I just want to sort of share a survey of the minority respondents. So I'm focusing only on the minority respondents in this particular study. 204 of the minority respondents were women. They were on the younger side. 109 of them had some college, but then you notice that similar percentages that completed high school and a bachelor's degree, around just over 20%. Most of them were single. Most of them were making $10,000 to $30,000, but then you see that there was 17%, just over 17% that were under $10,000, and then that 30 to 50,000%, there was just over 15%. So mostly 18 to 25-year-old Black women with some college who were single made up the bulk of our survey respondents. Out of the minority survey respondents, they mostly use Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Yes, there was Snapchat. They listed other ones, but these were the 3 dominant ones. And that, as you can see, most of them spend 0 to 3 hours on social media. But when you start looking at the number of hours spent, it decreases in who claimed to spend that many hours on social media. But that 0 to 5 hours starts looking like a really long number when you think about the context of your day and then what you see on social media. So related to COVID-19 questions, 322 out of the 360 minority respondents thought COVID-19 is a serious issue. At the time of the survey, vaccines were widely available in the DC area. And I say that because only 237 of the 360 were vaccinated. That means that 34.4% of our survey within minorities, then they're self-identified minorities, were not vaccinated. And in this paper, we really wanted to figure out what's the difference, what's going on. So when you start thinking about COVID-19, the belief in the vaccine, those claims, those conspiracy theories, 45.3% of our minority respondents viewed the vaccine as germ warfare. And these same people then felt that, so let me backtrack. 163 out of the 360 viewed it as germ warfare, but every single one of the unvaccinated people thought it was a form of germ warfare. 84 do not plan to get the vaccine, and 21 out of the 124 consider themselves anti-vaxxers. And so this is that tipping point, is like we're stuck at a vaccination rate of less than 70% based on minority participants in our survey. And so when we looked at the unvaccinated, we see that most of them are spending 1 to 5 hours, or it should be 0 to 5 hours on social media. 22 spending 5 to 9 hours. 8 of the 124 spend more than 10 hours. And those who are not vaccinated do not plan to get vaccinated, but most of them do not think of themselves as anti-vaxxers. Remember, I just said 21 of them thought of themselves as anti-vaxxers. Most of them think that it's just this vaccine. So it's this vaccine that is the problem. The significance, the unvaccinated and vaccinated believe that the government is using COVID-19 vaccines to track them. And this was the majority of all the respondents. Even the ones that got vaccinated, they felt like they were being tracked. But this is the hard part of the vaccination story, is that we've got this mixed bag of some people believe that the government is tracking them, but they'll get the vaccine. And now the next part is to figure out why. But it's the complicated picture of what and why individuals are getting, who and why individuals are getting vaccinated and some aren't, even though they have the same beliefs. And then we believe it's a spread of misinformation. And so inconsistent information, disparate health outcomes, and that to get around this, we as a society really going to have to take an interdisciplinary approach to understand why some people of color are not getting vaccinated. So our next steps are more data collection. As I mentioned at the start, we will do a survey in June of this year, which will be exactly a year after the original survey. And then we will do more focus groups and interviews, and then use that to tease out these differences, and then hopefully create curriculum. And my colleague, Dr. Caruth, will have his students create a social media campaign that's directed toward the Black community. Thank you.
Thank you, Keisha. I appreciate that. All right. Let's see. I think Dr. Samuels, you are next. Let me see. I think you have sent me your paper, perhaps, unless you want to try to share it yourself.
Yeah, I think I see it. I think I see it this time. Yeah.
All right. Okay, good.
All right.
Perfect. Excellent.
Okay. All right. Let me.
I'm going to set the timer for 10 minutes for you. Please note that your colleague, Dr. Middlemash, so I don't know what to do because Keisha says she missed all of my messages. So I will talk it because it's hard
We love her.
to chat when we're doing other things. So no problem. Very interesting research. I'm looking forward to this next conversation too. So Dr. Samuel, you start introducing your topic. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for the patience with that we've had in trying to work through some of these technical difficulties. I'm going to go real fast. History repeating itself, nullifying the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So all of us to kind of remember the 15th Amendment, of course, prohibited states from denying the right to vote on the basis of race. At the time, it was considered one of the crowning achievements of the whole abolitionist struggle and the fight for citizenship for ex-slaves. And Congress had the power to enforce that with appropriate legislation. But it wouldn't be long before there was a violent backlash. After a brief period of federal intervention in voting rights, the North quickly lost their political stomach for this fight. With the Compromise of 1877 being one of those big watershed moments. Southern Redeemers insisted that Reconstruction governments were corrupt and run by the ignorant. And so what they were doing was necessary for good government. And so when we think about a lot of the violence that was associated with that, it's easy to forget oftentimes so-called race neutral arguments were used to justify disenfranchisement, especially by the United States Supreme Court. And so really by a little more of the turn of the century, the 15th Amendment for all intents and purposes was really nullified as far as Black people were concerned. And so, we fast forward to the Voting Rights Act, which is obviously the most effective piece of voting rights legislation ever passed by the Congress of the United States. And I'm going to go into all of the things that it did in terms of increasing Black participation, increasing the number of Black elected officials. It was extended several times. Particularly what I want to focus on is the pre-clearance requirement. That states and localities with a history of racial discrimination in voting were required to get any changes to election rules pre-cleared by the Justice Department or the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. And that served as an effective deterrent against some of the more egregious efforts to deny or suppress or dilute the right to vote for African Americans, though that doesn't mean that they didn't try with second generation methods. And for much of that history, the courts repeatedly rejected legal challenges to the Voting Rights Act. That is, until recently. The Roberts Court, and this is a typo, that should be 2013. But in Shelby County versus Holder, case out of Alabama, the Supreme Court by 5-4 margin held not that Section 5 was unconstitutional, that's the pre-clearance requirement, but actually Section 4, which creates a coverage formula that determines which states and localities are required to get pre-clearance. And so by striking Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, it effectively nullifies Section 5, because if there's no criteria, there's no pre-clearance. Now, Congress has the power to rewrite the formula, which it hasn't done. But it seemed to assume that we've made so much progress toward racial equality that states can be trusted now to be good actors, and there are enough robust legislation out there, laws, to protect against isolated incidents of racial discrimination. Well, that's not what happened. Shelby was almost like the firing of a gun, like a track meet to begin a new wave of voter suppression. I mean, literally that day, the state of Texas enacted a voter ID law that had previously been blocked by the Department of Justice. North Carolina changed the focus of its legislative session in mid-session, to come up with new suppressive laws. They've stiffened ID requirements. They've limited early voting, Sunday voting, made it harder to register. We've had we've had thousands of poll closures since Shelby. It just happened to be mostly in Black and Latino communities. We've had an acceleration in the use of voter purges since Shelby. And all of these changes have been justified because of the need to protect against so-called election fraud or voter fraud. There's just one problem with all of these arguments, is that they're just simply not true. Voter fraud in the United States is practically non-existent. There's a lot of studies have been done on this, but you're more likely to be struck by lightning, literally, than to find a verified case of voter impersonation fraud. But why let the truth get in the way of political expediency? Because in actuality, sometimes when people slip up and tell the truth about this, what they really say is that this is really about eliminating just enough Democratic voters for Republicans to win elections. So you fast forward election to 2020, when we have in the midst of a global pandemic, we have some of a respite from some of this voter suppression, as once in a century pandemic creates pressure that states responded to ease voting laws to make it easier for people to vote in the midst of the pandemic. Of course, President Trump and many Republicans attacked a lot of these new measures, claiming the election would be rigged, especially mail-in voting, even though he voted by mail himself. And this was probably a contributing factor to the fact that record numbers of Americans voted in the 2020 election. And of course, we know the result. Biden flipped 5 states. That Clinton lost to Donald Trump in 2016. And minority voters were key to those victories. And so, of course, the president tried to overturn the election. He came dangerously close to succeeding. Has been learning more and more each day about how close he came. However, Republicans in the states have taken on the stopping the steal mantra as a justification for new rounds of voter suppression. We have here Brian Kemp, who kind of led the way in Georgia, signing SB 202. 19 states since then have enacted 34 laws that have been designed in various ways to make voting harder. They've reversed most of the emergency measures that were enacted during the pandemic to ease voting. But more importantly, they've also made it easier for partisan actors or state legislatures to actually interfere with the election administration process in some ways. And so it looks like these efforts are not only making it harder to vote, but also taking over the process of counting the votes and potentially subverting results that are not in their favor. They continue to relitigate the 2020 election with so-called audits that also continue to sow doubt about the political system and the election system. And with all of this, it could have been worse. Is because Democratic governors in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania actually vetoed some voter suppression bills that were enacted by the Republicans who had a majority in the legislature. But however, the GOP wins those elections this year in 2022, a Republican governor would sign those bills. So that's what the states have been up to since 2020. And what has Congress done? Nothing. Next slide. And ultimately, these are the 2 senators who have become the most famous Democratic senators in America, and largely for the wrong reasons. Is that voting rights is now become a deeply divisive issue. Republicans have filibustered every voting rights bill that has come through. So the Democrats attempted to try to change the rules about the filibuster in order to pass a voting rights bill. And Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin, we support the bill, but we don't support changing the filibuster. So perhaps the filibuster is more important than democracy. And so to this date, nothing has passed in Congress on that goal. But we also should, okay, okay.
Dr. Samuels, it's 10 minutes, but you can continue.
Okay, all right. I'm just gonna say real quickly. The Supreme Court, by the way, is no friend of voting rights right now. In fact, they're doing things to make Shelby County worse. When it comes to making it easier for gerrymandering, it's no longer a judicial issue. And the last point I want to make is that the decision they made in Arizona real quickly, Brnovich versus the Democratic National Committee, bodes poorly for in terms of these new voter suppression laws. Because essentially what the court says that if state legislators genuinely believe that their laws prevent voter fraud, even if that is demonstrably false, they cannot be held guilty of discriminatory intent. So now they're gutting Section 4 and Section 5, but now they're gutting Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act by making it harder for you to sue and win. Okay, I'm going to stop because you told me I ran out of time.
Thank you, Dr. Samuels. I'm sorry, this is a great presentation. So it's a great kind of overview and summary of the kinds of changes we've seen over the last decade or more related to drastic changes in minority voting rights. So thank you. And hopefully we can have some questions. Let's see, who's next? All right, AJ Rice. AJ Rice here. Well, whose paper is that? Okay, let's see. I have AJ Rice, Jada Addison, and Christina Williams.
Hi, Christina Williams here.
Okay, all right.
Hi, can everyone hear me clearly? Okay, great.
Yes. Hi, good to see you. Did you have are you sharing a screen or are you presenting?
I'm going to share my screen.
Okay, perfect. I'll start the timer. I will try to interrupt you more appropriately. We'll see. All right.
Thank you. If at any point you can't hear me, just let me know because I'm on hotel Wi-Fi, so it might go out.
Okay.
1 second, I'm actually having a problem sharing my screen. So is there an email I can send it to?
You can send it to me, vsc@purdue.edu. I'll put it in the chat.
Actually, for the sake of time and not to hold everybody else up, I'll just talk and hopefully
Okay.
It's not boring.
That's fine.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Williams. I'm an undergraduate political science student at Clark Atlanta University, and this research is my senior thesis project. And so my topic is the effects of state election laws on youth voter turnout. And so I will just talk through it. Bear with me again. Unfortunately, you can't see the screen. But so a little context about why I chose this topic and why it's timely and important. Just as the last presenter spoke to a lot of the restrictive voting laws that have been passed across the country through the past couple of years. Specifically, the Brennan Center for Justice says that 19 states have enacted 33 laws that will make it harder for Americans to vote. However, at the same time, 25 states have enacted 62 laws that expand voting access. And so this is important, especially with the context of the increased voter turnout of youth voters and the impact that we've had on electoral outcomes in the 2020 general election and in the runoff election in Georgia. And going into how we want to replicate that turnout and look at what laws really facilitated that in the future. And then also the fact that a lot of these laws that are dubbed either restrictive or expansive are not just restrictive or just expansive. A lot of the laws have restrictive provisions within them or expansive provisions within them, but they get labeled with one title. So we can't really break down how they work or how they don't. And so that's part of the reason why I'm doing this research. Also, there's not a lot of research on this topic that focuses on youth voters. I'm in Gen Z myself, obviously, and we don't make up a lot of the research body, which is why I feel like it was important to center it on my generation. And so with that, my hypothesis is that states with convenience voting laws will have higher youth voter turnout rates in future presidential elections than states with restrictive voting laws. And just to kind of clearly define my terms, because like I mentioned, they oftentimes get grouped together. I am labeling convenience voting laws based on a scale of how many actual convenient provisions they have within them versus restrictive ones, and then the same vice versa. So I will only call a law restrictive if it has more restrictive provisions in it than expansive ones, not just because it has one restrictive provision that we all know about. So I'm trying to take a much more clear approach on that. And so my research questions are, how, if at all, convenience or restrictive voting laws affect youth voter turnout in presidential elections by state, and if those effects vary by race and or gender? Are convenience voting laws more effective than restrictive voting laws at increasing youth voter turnout? And how do differences in youth voter turnout affect electoral and partisan outcomes? And then, so how I am collecting my data, I am sending out surveys to youth who vote and who voted and who didn't vote in the 2020 presidential election. And a little sample of the questions that I'm asking are, for those who did vote, there's a question that asks them to rate on a scale of 1 to 5, indicate to what extent the following factors impacted your decision to vote in the 2020 general election. And so some of the factors are the availability of same-day voter registration in your state, the availability, duration, and accessibility of in-person early voting in your state, the availability and duration of no excuse absentee voting in your state, and voter ID requirements in your state. So I'm asking the youth to rank how much of an impact those different factors had on their decision to vote or not to vote in the 2020 presidential election. And then for those who didn't vote, I'm asking them, how much would any of those factors change your mind and encourage you to vote in the next presidential election? Then I'm also asking youth to rate their level of understanding of their state's election laws, and then rate whether they think it makes it harder or easier for youth to vote. So that's pretty much the general overview. Again, this is my senior thesis project, and I'm still in the data collection phase, so I don't have any conclusions, but I do think this research is really important, and that is where I'm going with it. So thank you for this platform.
Oh, great timing, Christina. So I appreciate it. And bravo for you to be presenting at NCOACH, your senior thesis. Congratulations on it. I'm excited to know how things kind of turn out. Sounds like a really interesting project. So thank you for sharing with us. What about Jayme Beasley?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Jayme.
Okay, can everyone see me? Okay, yeah,
Yep.
okay. So I'm going to, oh, I have screen sharing privileges. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen and then I'll start. But why isn't, okay, hold on one second.
Okay.
All right, can we see? Yes. Yes,
Oh,
okay. Can you see the
Jayme,
screen?
yeah, we can also see your other slides too. You might want to go into
Cool.
that other mode where, perfect.
Okay. So I'm gonna try to fly through this as well. This is my dissertation topic. I am a PhD candidate in Department of Political Science at Clark Atlanta University, and I will be studying the politics of water, a case study of Jackson, Mississippi. So the purpose of the study, water politics are very important in many cities around the world, and obviously it's becoming more important because the availability of fresh water is changing due to climate change and environmental degradation. In the US more recently, we can look at Flint, Detroit, Newark, and even in Atlanta as a couple of examples of how water politics impacts communities, but very few people have looked at such topic in Jackson. It intrigued me because the city served as one of the cradles of the civil rights movement, and however, currently civic engagement around such topic is very low. There's a silence around the issue from activists and citizens. And so, like I said, this observation began to bother me, and it sparked my initial questions of how citizens in Jackson see the role of their local government. And so therefore, the study is important for a few reasons. Elected officials and scholars applaud the progress of Black people in particular, and the progress that they've made after enslavement, and particularly just, across the US. And Mississippi is one of the states in the South that served or that played a major role in advancing the Southern economy. And Jackson currently has a predominantly Black population, and majority of their local elected officials are also Black. And so examining the conditions of one system that literally brings life into the city and the state gives us more insight on whether this notion that Black people have advanced is true or not, and how all these improvements apply to the people in Mississippi. Secondly, even though water has an impact on all communities, there are certain communities that are involved with who gets the improvements necessary to their water system and infrastructure more than others, and for various reasons. And I will explore some of these reasons, particularly how they unfold in Jackson. Thirdly, it will illuminate the importance of civic engagement and in the entire process of creating, implementing, and evaluating public policy, particularly on the local level. It gives us some insight too about what it means to be a Pan-African mayor, as the current mayor has claimed to have his understandings of politics through a Pan-African lens. I also want to say that the purpose of my exploration, particularly of this state and this city, is to provide answers and action items for community and activists inside of Jackson to address political apathy in regards to water or this water system. So I'm not going to read the slide. I'll just move on. Statement of the problem. Scholars and elected officials, practitioners are arguing that the current state of Jackson's water system is not a new event, but it has actually been a 100-year problem. And so with this in mind, the history of the city of Jackson is important to give historical context and to discuss the various ways that local governments have attempted to remedy the issue over time. Former Mayor Johnson argues that race is one of the determining factors in why the state and the federal government is so slow about giving funds to Jackson to improve their water system. And we know that race is pervasive in American politics, and as such, it is sometimes a determining factor on how state and federal governments are dealing with the acts of local elected officials. But I will argue that it is the lack of accountability from citizens and similarly non-state actors that the water system is in the condition that it's in now. I'm not specifically saying that the water system has failed. My hope is to prove that the water system has failed and then come up with or explain why, particularly on the local level and as it relates to non-state actors. So I'm being very careful in my words. So if I stop, I'm sorry. Wait, I lost my place, sorry. Okay, water infrastructure is neglected because pipes are underground, very simple, right? Like we don't see the water pipes. And so we don't see the deterioration over time. And if we're thinking of cities as income generating mechanisms, they tend to not think about long-term planning for the influx of people moving in and out of the cities. And so consequently, when Black and Brown people capture municipalities, they tend to also inherit financial constraints that stem from a decreased tax base and then a neglected infrastructure. Did I move on? No. Okay. So really quick, a history of Jackson. We know Jackson is the capital city. When Jackson was first established, it served as a railroad hub. And it experienced rapid expansion in the 1880s. And the city served as a major telecommunication and transportation hub in the South. And so this water system that they currently use was built in 1888, and the city purchased this water system from a private company in 1908. And I don't want to get into like all the particulars about that. I'll just keep going. So my central research question is, how has local government and non-state actors developed Jackson's water and sanitation infrastructure over the last 100 years? I know 100 years is a lot, but I want to emphasize that if the problem is 100 years, then it's difficult to pick. Well, originally I wanted to pick when Jackson elected its first Black mayor, but that would perhaps insinuate that it happened when Black people were first elected into local office. So that's why my research question is structured the way that it is. Okay, methodology. So I am doing an exploratory case study with the goal to better understand water politics and again, how they play out in the locality and particularly Jackson. At some point, I hope to write a book and I plan to solve the problem. But for now, it is not to solve the problem, but perhaps give better explanation so that my explanation can be used as a framework for citizens in Jackson and non-state actors in Jackson to use it to push the conversation forward and come up with a solution. And so I'm using a case study to get a clear understanding of the issues of infrastructure, repair, and updates on the local level. Also to explain how fragmentation and lack of accountability among local levels of government contribute to the current conditions of the water system. Did you give me a card? I can't see, Ms. Valerie. No, I can keep going.
Yes, you
Okay.
have 2 minutes.
Okay. So this is just a slide of the annual income of people in Mississippi in 2020. And I wanted to put this up to give context of like the general state of Mississippi. It's the poorest in the union. I added this slide again just to give context of the state. This also is context of the state information. I don't want to take too long there. This also is context of the state because the governor is essentially the president of the state. And so there have been 65 governors. All of them have been white, heterosexual Christian men. And so that also gives insight into how the politics play out in the state. And also to add that for more context and then to better explain why the state is in the situation that it's in, is the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, was ratified after 3/4 of the state passed it in 1865 at the close of Civil War. With 4 other states eventually passing the amendment, Mississippi did not symbolically and officially adopt it until 1995. And it did not officially notify Washington of the vote until 2003. Just to give context of like the political climate of the state. And so you said I had 2 minutes. This is some information about the mayors of Jackson. They've also been male, white heterosexual Christian men up until 1997 when the city elected its first Black mayor, Dr. Harvey Johnson. Currently, Chokwe Lumumba serves as mayor. I have so much more I want to say, but I'll wrap up there. So I want to touch here really quick, I promise. So non-state actors, I'm interested in nonprofits because nonprofits serve a special place in society. They're not elected officials, but they're also perhaps vetted or institutionalized by the state. I have not found any nonprofits that have been working specifically on educating the citizens of Jackson about what the water problem means and how they can mobilize the problem to make it an important part of the legislative process, both on the city, state, and the federal level. So I looked at NAACP, specifically their state chapter, SNCC, because SNCC was started in Jackson. In the Mississippi Black Legislative Caucus is a small group of Black state legislators. I can't get into that right now, but what this slide is to say that these groups that are on this screen focus largely on registering people to vote, perhaps mobilizing people to vote, but in the instance of a vital system as water, they're not educating citizens on what first is the problem and what are the consequences of non-participation as it relates to water. Okay.
Thank you, Jayme. I know you had to race through and you probably have so much more to talk about. So
I do.
I know, I'm sure. Thank you. But so hopefully we can cover some of it in discussion. We only have about 10 minutes left. I'm gonna take 2, I'm sorry, as discussant and chair, but I'm not gonna go over in any detailed way any of the papers. And so, let me see, I'm gonna change my view. And so there is at least one question in the chat that I hope that we can address. There are many people in the audience. Please start putting your questions in the chat to each of the presenters. We might not get to all of the questions verbally, but if you put your questions in the chat, then at least the presenters will know who asked the question and may be able to follow up or at least benefit from your comments or your questions. I just wanted to say just a couple of things really quickly. All of the papers are so interesting. I can't wait to see them in print and going forward. I'm only going to ask one question, even though I have so many more comments. So for Dr. Middlemass and Caruth, I did wonder, I think there's a lot of important information and this is really meaningful work, but I wondered if beginning with the Tuskegee or Henrietta Lacks, is that the right framework for this? I think an additional kind of framework for vaccine hesitancy or unwillingness in this instance is actually going to come from perhaps some religious beliefs as well as kind of the natural health sector. That is, I'm a vegetarian or I'm this or I'm that. And so I don't want to put this in my body. Also the politics of it, that it came from a president who was clearly anti-Black. And it came under his administration, although the push came under a Democratic administration. Even Kamala Harris said, I'm not sure I'll take it. So it was so quick to come about. And I think it wasn't even articulated in the way that, I wonder if people knew, hey, it was a Black doctor who helped develop this or something, if that would be useful, if it would increase some credibility. For Dr., I'm moving quickly, so I wanna hurry. For Dr. Samuels, I love the paper. I think it's so important. I'm looking forward to seeing more about this, hopefully in the NPSR or elsewhere. I did wonder, I think it's really important to see the kind of crosshairs on Section 5. I want us to consider kind of where this comes from. 2 things happen, of course, and you touch on them. One is that it was an activist Supreme Court that did this. They actually said this is a piece of sunset legislation that will never sunset because Congress will never take action. Congress will always be too afraid to kill the voting rights bill. So the court stepped in, unelected 9 jurists on the court. And so that's one. It's like the court said, oh, we're going to make you sunset because you're unwilling to. It's ridiculous. The other piece of it is that the strategy here actually goes back to at least the 1980s or 1990s, when conservatives and white Republicans started to talk about, why is it that only these states are covered? Why isn't Pennsylvania covered? Why aren't these other places covered? And so they actually push for expansion of coverage. And the logic of that actually undoes the coverage formula. So it is an ironic and deeply despicable kind of outcome. So I wanted to mention that. I'm gonna wrap up. We only have 5 minutes. I just want to say, Christina, I love it. I want you to think about how you're going to deliver your survey. I think that you're right on with this scale. that you're going to use, but that means there's going to be a middle of your scale where it is neither restrictive nor convenience, and you're going to have a label for that. People normally use hybrid. You need to figure out what that is, but that's a nice intuition that you have. And for Jayme, I did wonder about the politics of accountability here. I didn't get quite far enough to understand that part yet, but I wanted you to also clarify the politics of water. Are we talking about drinking water, flooding, sanitation, septic tanks? There's all kinds of politics of water in Jackson. And also the role of the state in deliberately starving Jackson in any number of ways that starts at least in the 1960s. All right, thank you. And I will open up the floor. I hope to hear from Kathy, who says, what about revolution? So let's have a discussion.
So that comment was driven by Albert's presentation, and it's clear to me that we have to become more active. And I don't know, it's something probably INCO should give serious consideration to, regardless of our tax status.
Active in what way, Kathy?
You know, in terms of the voting rights, redistricting, I don't feel that we're responding, or we shouldn't be reactionary, but that we're doing anything to, I guess in part, educate the masses and, you know, kind of frame the conversation. I just think we are just sitting by, doing nothing but talking.
Well, I will let others respond, but I did want to say too, I see Jayme has her hand raised. I did want to say too that this is a multi-level assault all at once, right? To shrink the electorate with the big lie, that's the whole explanation for the big lie, is that you needed for these legislators to be able to say, my constituents believe it's true that fraud happened, so they needed the big lie in order to make it happen. And when they have that, then they can say, well, I believe it, so it can't possibly be that I'm trying to undermine something. That's what's so critical about the last comment that Albert made. But we're also in the middle of redistricting and all of these other things. There are so many assaults that we're dealing with. I agree with you. I don't know how we get the revolution. I suppose that we have to tie this to something else, but we are in the middle of a kind of redemptive moment for the Republican Party, I think. All right, Jayme, and I'll let others answer their own questions. I'm gonna be quiet. Yeah, Jayme.
So to Miss Kathy's comment, to Miss Kathy's comments, I would just say I think that we have to return to perhaps Dr. Mac Jones's essay about the responsibility of a Black political scientist, and similarly what Ms. Chapman said about the assault on multiple levels. I think perhaps the work that we do as scholars at the end of like our presentations or like books or whatever papers we produce, there should be an action item attached to it. I think from my perspective, I think one of the things that a lot of Americans do not understand, that's Black, white, blue, and purple, are the structures and functions of government and how they operate and how they intertwine. So I think like our role as scholars is to like explain and like you said, educate people on all the various assaults, but then two, leaving them like with something to do. So sometimes you have these conversations, most times we have them in silos. We have these conversations and there's like no action item. It's like, oh yeah, like damn it, we're mad, but like, how do we get, so I think a good example of that was summer of 2020, right? How do we get the momentum of people that, you know, are obviously mad for all these various reasons to push past the feelings and then go into action? So I think perhaps like as scholars, we can think through that a little bit better. Like how, what is the action item after we have presented our research, our beautiful research? How do we get an action item out of it? So, yeah.
Thank you, Jayme. I wanted to give Dr. Samuels a chance to respond.
Yeah. My first thought was that Kathy always asked the easy questions. You know, America has a reactionary tradition, and the politics of now is very similar to the politics of the late 19th century. You know, it's like we in a Reconstruction / second Gilded Age, and I think it's a great for framing where we are. I understand this is a pattern. This is a pattern of how America works. So even when we make progress, it ain't over because they're coming back. Right. And one thing I would call one thing I think that's also scary is that it can, you know, as bad as it is right now, it can get worse. In 1889, there was a push by the Republican Congress, a closely divided Congress, to pass a federal voting rights bill. It failed. It failed.
Mhm.
The Democrats made gains in the midterms, and Republicans abandoned the effort entirely. Mississippi then came up with a mass disenfranchisement bill and spread all over the South. And my fear is that it can get worse. We just failed to pass a federal voting rights bill. If the Republicans regain control of Congress, it can get as bad as it is now. It can get a whole lot worse.
Thank you, Dr. Samuel. And I see that Dr. Henderson has put in the chat a link to his new book, which is directly about revolution. Dr. Riley, I'm gonna give you a second. I'm pretty sure that we don't have, so I'm gonna try to go about 5 minutes over to give folks.
It's okay. It's okay.
And you're running the program, Dr. Riley, so you can let me know because I'm pretty sure we don't have any more time, but I'm willing to stay here. So.
No, I was just going to respond to Dr. Golden's comment, and I think this is something that we haven't really talked about as political scientists, is the implications of what this particular political moment means for the future of a democracy where people don't see the system as responding. And so I think that, you know, we've got to have more conversations about that, you know, this period does resemble historical moments like post-Reconstruction, post-civil rights, but I think we're moving into a new era where the very stability of a democratic society is at risk when we get to banning books and academic freedom. And I think we've got to have more direct conversations of connecting those nuances about what this moment means for a future, you know, the future of American democracy and globally as well.
Oh, great point. I will say that as much as people will convince you we can turn back the clock, they can't. We can still get passports and we can travel so far. So go on and get them because you might have to live elsewhere. Thank you all. Please click. Please save the chat. Presenters, please save the chat. There might be some. I won't close out yet. Please click on the link to the erudite. Dr. Henderson's book that is also in the chat, and many thanks, especially to Dr. Golden and Dr. Boone. I appreciate you both being here. We stand on your shoulders, maybe not sometimes so ably, and certainly trying to balance with all the other things in the world. I appreciate everyone. I hope it was a stimulating conversation. Please continue with the conference.
Thank you, Valeria. Good job. Thank you.
Oh, awesome, awesome. You made it easy. All this brilliance in the room. Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
So Valeria, I see you got in, huh?
Margaret did to send me some links, but I had